Hello, I'm Bill Remfrey, the instructor of the Woody Landscape Plants course in the Prairie Hort Certificate program. I've put together a series of 5 short lectures for you to use as you see fit, not included on an exam material specifically, but to try and supplement what you have in your course material on Angel, and also that will help you hopefully in putting together your assignment 2, as you'll see in your packages. Today I'm going to talk about the function of plants a little bit, and then start to talk about the elements of design that are inherent in woody plants, and I will just cover 2 of them in this particular video. Now, the functions of plants in the landscape, of course, many things we think of as the first thing that comes to mind often is aesthetic beauty. We put them in there because we think they look nice. And it's been shown some interesting things, that they have positive effects on one's psyche, and so positive psychological effects occur. Things like, even in the workplace, increased productivity and decreased absenteeism. So a well landscaped workplace can actually help make a more productive workplace. Real estate values, of course, are also increased by a nice landscape, and percentages vary up to 10% of the value of a home is the landscaping itself. You also, it's been shown that increased rental rates of office space may occur with a well-landscaped area. And it's also been shown in places like strip malls that if they're well landscaped, that it's been documented through research that more people will come there and use the actual area. So there's lots of positive effects that can translate into economics as well. Now, there are several functions to plants in the landscape. They enclose spaces, so that can be used as a way of enclosing spaces, and of course giving privacy. Modifying the illusion of space, which means that it'll change the way, how you view or how you perceive the space. Can be used to as part of the enclosing. A more extreme example is the screening, to actually block out visually something like a neighbor or some ugly, unsightly area. Somewhat audio as well. It can be used to accentuate an area. You can sort of frame an area like this bench around a pool in Australia, or soften from a harsh concrete or brick walls. It can actually soften by using vines or plants around it. And also another useful function, which kind of falls from some of the other ones we've talked about, is the whole idea of just hiding unsightly objects. Not only screening whole areas, but just actually taking objects and plants around them so you can't see them. There are several environmental functions with plants. One is, of course, controlling erosion around soil erosion in particular, from both wind and water. So ground covers, you can use turf, but you can also use woody plants, ground cover woody plants, or other kinds of perennial plants for erosion control. It can also be used as windbreaks. Windbreaks I'll talk about a little bit further along, but basically windbreaks are useful. Of course, we all know that in the prairies they're used around homesteads and to protect fields, so they're a very important function that way. Temperature control is another important thing, especially with trees, but all plants have to some extent. Temperature control, just to back up, is related to things like actual shade, so that if you're under a tree, it actually reduces the amount of heat load from the sun. But the plants themselves transpire water that's taken up by the roots through the leaves, which can control or temperature and actually reduce temperature. It's kind of nature's air conditioners. So we know that they have that function. So any kind of plant around your house will do that, even grass. Noise buffer, I mentioned that before, but that's some of these screens can be used as noise buffers as well. And we can also use plants for absorbing pollution. They're used more and more for absorbing pollutants, breaking down pollutants, and this whole area that's occurring out there is known as phytoremediation. Can also be used, of course, as wildlife habitat. Now I want to talk move to the whole area of landscape design. We know that design really can refer to lots of things, whether it be clothes, houses, but also it refers to landscapes. And really all we're talking about is the way in which objects are placed in a particular area, and in this case a landscape. In this case it's usually plants, but it can be other things, to achieve a certain objective or a certain purpose that you're trying to you want to accomplish. So one of the things is you can use landscapes are all about organizing space around buildings. So buildings can be maybe the feature that you're, say, your home, but then the landscape can be uh, placed in such a way to accentuate that and define not only its look but also its use. And it helps, landscape design also helps to create movement of traffic in and around the particular landscape, whether you're in a park or around a home, it doesn't matter. And of course, landscaping enhances the quality of your life in this area. You can have it for, again, it can be just for aesthetics, but it could be everything. It could be food, it could be recreation, it could be temperature control, so you can sit out. So it really can change. There's a lot of difference between a well-landscaped yard and one that's just nothing, basically, but maybe grass even, as to how well that can be used or how efficiently that can be used. So there is three-dimensional modification of space using plants, and so that's the whole idea. It's just like building a building. A landscape design is essentially a three-dimensional thing. You've got your area, but you've also got the vertical aspect, even underground. So you use both different kinds of materials. You use what are so-called the soft components, we call them, and those are the plants, basically, the products of your nurseries and so on. And then you've got the so-called hard landscaping components, which of course the buildings and the stones and the sidewalks and decks or whatever it may be. So we have to remember that all of this course design is mostly about plant material. There are other aspects to this. Now I'm going to talk about the elements of design, and there are basically four of them. And today in this video, we'll cover two of them. We're talking about the four elements of design, and these elements of design are universal, if you will. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about landscape design or designing the room in your home. These things all apply. What I want to show here is how plants incorporate or manifest some of these design elements, and therefore when you're thinking about landscaping, you should consider these particular design elements when you choose plants or groups of plants. So I want you to think about that one, especially when it comes to your assignment 2. The first one I want to talk about is form, and really that's the shape, usually considered shape, but sometimes, especially with plants, it includes things more like also the way the branches are placed, and there's space in there and so on. So form can be more than just the sort of outline. It kind of is a little bit inherent in the whole plant itself, but by and large we're talking mostly about shape. So let's take a better look at that. So it's the shape of an object or maybe many objects in the landscape. In this picture that you can see at the bottom, you can see that basically the way that there's many trees because it's a forest, and that actually is a form in itself because it goes up and down, and you can see the branching and all that. So it all is contributing to the form of the landscape in this case. Usually when we think of form when it comes to horticultural or landscaping a yard, we think of it more in terms of our own individual plants. So plants includes, when we talk about form of plants, we include density and orientation of branches. So here are some of the forms that you can consider. Things like spreading, which is where the top is wider than you can see right here, it's wider than it is tall. You can go to round. Round is round. Oval, you usually think of as upright oval, where your crown is taller than it is wide. The crown is really just the whole leafy area above the branches. Where we got conical shapes, such as in the conifers, hence the name, or sometimes another one that could be sort of fan-shaped, such as this American elm. Line is the other one. Line, of course, and form are related because line sort of outlines a lot of the things. You've got the form or the shape, but line is really what you see, and line is what you sort of see when you look at a landscape. It directs the eye. So the lines in the landscape, although we don't really think about it sometimes, that's what your eye tends to be following. And also it's the lines, just like when you're looking at a drawing, a two-dimensional drawing, the way the lines are placed on the drawing can give a real depth or three-dimensional look to it. It definitely is something that your eye tends to follow. So lines can be such things. There's angles, there's horizontal, vertical lines, there's lines around the trees you can see here. So all these things are lines. All these orange lines in the picture show line, and it defines shape and form, like I said. So line and shape and form kind of go together, but you got to remember that line can be here in a sense, if you can see it here, even though there's line here, it's not really defining shape or form in this case so much, but it is in terms of this upright oval tree or this conical or somewhat pyramidal shaped plant here. Line can really be quite, can have an listed emotion, can be relaxed, or can create anxiety. Like really stark vertical lines can create a little bit of a anxiety, whereas horizontal lines or curved lines can be a little softer and a little bit more relaxing. So one can consider that when you're looking at the way the plants look. And of course it can direct your eye, just like I said, it can direct your eye in general. Of course, the way branches and plants, which are one of the things that really define line to some extent, can actually suggest or direct your eye downwards, say in the case of weeping trees. So line is strongly expressed in the branching habit, and it's especially pronounced in woody deciduous plants in winter. So here's an example of line. You've got, again, you have to look in sort of inside the plant because you've got different lines all over the place, but the predominant thing that you're seeing in this case with the spruce is more or less horizontal line because of the branches. Here you see on this particular crown, you can see that the branches are what we call ascending. They're kind of going upward but not straight up, sort of at an angle, whereas if you get more, this one's known as upright, and you can see that this one's a little more formal, and it isn't quite as soft. It does, I guess you could say it gives you a little bit more of an anxiety provoking feeling than, say, looking at the softer horizontal lines, or even the weeping lines or the arching lines of the spirea here. And here's another example of another upright one where it's kind of got a little bit of a sense of being very formal. So I'm going to leave it there for this video, and I will pick it up in the next one to talk about color and texture.